Hello, we welcome you this evening. I'm Gini Stimpson, and I'm the chair of the Neighborhoods Committee. And we have tried for a while to have Ray Williams come, and we have it organized, and then COVID would hit or something else would happen. So we're so delighted that tonight it's finally happened. And it's such an honor to have you come and share with us and to help us know what the work is you're doing. And we're always curious how we can pitch in and help in some way. So don't forget to let us know that. And Laura Weese actually knows Ray and his family, and she has been instrumental in getting him here this evening. So Laura, thank you for that, and thank you for all the work you do.
Well, it is a real pleasure to introduce Ray, who I met living in the Mount Baker community starting in the 60s, and he and his family were outstanding people in the neighborhood. Joan Singler today brought Ray a copy of Seattle in Black and White, the book that Joan, Jean Durning, Maid Adams, and Betty Lou Valentine wrote about the history of Seattle CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, and this is in the early 60s. Well, it turns out that this Ray's father was the first president of the Seattle CORE, and that's nice that you now have a copy of the book. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a little of Ray's background and then let him start speaking. Ray Williams was born in Seattle. He lives here now with his family. He earned a BA in biology from Harvard and an MA in education from the University of Washington. He spent 30 years as an educator in the classroom and administration around the United States and internationally. As an instructor in the Art Institute of Seattle, he was able to enrich his nutrition and biology classes with experiences in a local community garden. It was the connection between food, health, and life that led him to support urban food growing as a way to support his community. Ray is mixed race with European and African ancestry. His community building efforts have focused on the African American community. There are dramatic differences in health outcomes for different ethnic groups in the United States. Ray feels he can best serve his community by highlighting the benefits of growing some of their own food. Ray founded the Black Farmers Collective as an organization that would develop a farm in the center of Seattle, Yes Farm. That's the one that's our neighbor right here in Yesler, Terrace. And you can walk down there and see it and visit. I think he'll tell us about that. He serves as managing director, and he works in collaboration with farm managers and a board of directors. Ray works with other farmers and community partners to build healthy communities in Seattle and King County through growing food and sharing food system education. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Ray.
Thank you, Laura. And thanks for the book. That's great to be reminded of my father. We had a little dinner earlier, so thanks to the staff here that cooked the dinner and to all the folks that was very interesting conversations. I think I do want to honor my mother and father. I think the work that they did, the community work, led to me having a desire to serve the community. Right? The different folks that came through our house back in the day, whether it was CORE or other activities really, I think, really broadened my experiences and gave me a chance. I would add, I think the traveling that we did as a child gave me the courage to go out and travel and see parts of the world and give me some inspiration for what we're doing here. So yeah, I'm going to try to run this Black Farmers Collective. You know, how much time do we have? Are we almost done? 8:30?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to watch the time. I just realized this. I hadn't even talked about this, but
Earlier for questions.
sure, questions. I'll run through it. I'm just thinking I hadn't really even talked about this logo. This was done by a local artist that I knew in community, and I said, hey, we got this organization. Can you make me a logo? And I think, you know, it's got so much to it there. A lot of the black organizations have a fist, and I think that's an important deal, but here you've got two hands holding something, and I think that's how we like to, at least I like to try to have an organization, is that you reach out to people to make connections. We already had a good introduction to me. We'll see about this. I wanted to share a little bit and honor the folks that were part of getting this organization started. You know, I think it's a tradition to, you know, honor folks that are there. And then I also want to sort of raise this, have a bit of a conversation about African American contributors to agriculture in the United States, right? And it's one of the things I like to share with folks, especially young folks, who you know, may not know nearly as much about the history and contributions as they should. And then I'm going to share a little bit about our projects. I spent some time this afternoon uploading a few new photos and talking a little bit. And then I do want to just touch on the food system a bit, just as the way we think about it, right? And I think about having you, and then certainly I'll do some questions. So yeah, this is, you know, I was really a career science teacher. I love science as a student at Franklin High School. I went off to college, I studied it. My dad was an educator. I stayed away for a few years, but then went into the family business. Garfield, West Seattle High School, Marist School in Atlanta, International School in Curacao, you know, back to Seattle. My last public school job was at Rainier Beach High School. And then I went and worked downtown as a science instructor and a equity and race specialist, and then ended up teaching at the Art Institute, you mentioned, right? This institution that is, I'd probably still be there adjunct, but they closed. And so, but it was there that I did get this idea that one of the best things you can do for yourself is to grow food, and it was about teaching nutrition and understanding the folks that live the longest are from communities that get exercise, that are outside, that have community, right, and that eat well. I still eat meat, but even the vegan communities. And so that was something I wanted to try to bring to the community. I studied educational inequities, and I was on committees sitting around the room with people that are a lot smarter than me. So I thought I'd try to do something on the ground. And so that led me to start to do community garden work and building community gardens. And then we had an opportunity to get this space over at Yesler Terrace. And so we jumped on that, had the courage to try to do that, and we'll do that. We'll talk about that. So the work was around 2015, but we actually incorporated nonprofit in 2018. So that's sort of our year of start. Seattle Housing Authority was redeveloping Yesler Terrace, and you're probably a little aware of that, especially if you drive through there and you realize what's the construction and no parking. But that we are farming the freeway right away. And so Seattle Housing Authority has a 20-page contract with Washington Department of Transportation, and we have a 3-page contract with SHA to do the farming. And so they've been very supportive of us, so I want to thank that. You know, I'm mixed race, and so I think naturally I want to include everybody, but I also know that it's okay to say that you're trying to give opportunities to one group or another. And so the idea of trying to create a black-led system that's inclusive is something that they continue, to continue to address. And I think I'm learning more and more, and we all are, about how diverse the Black community is. And so there are folks that are really radical, and then there are folks that are not so radical, and different folks do different things. And I've been trying to work within the system to make some of this happen. These are some of the health benefits, and I think we can add, and I may ask you as you read these to maybe add some to me, right? Fresh food in our diet is really important. I just had a conversation with some indigenous chefs and elders about trying to get their community to eat less out of the can and out of the box and more fresh food. That's the first time I've heard that, but that's that idea, right? That our food system is built on commodity crops that are cheap to grow and will store well and will fill us up, but they don't have all the nutrition, I think, that you need. And so the idea of eating whole foods, not necessarily from Whole Foods, vegetables, vitamins and minerals, right, that you get from fresh greens, fiber that you get from fresh vegetables. I look at those traditional meals, and I'm trying to actually, copy some of them. You grow some beans and you have your protein. You grow some greens, you get vitamins and minerals. You have some root vegetables, some starch, you get the carbohydrates that you need. And this is that well-rounded diet that we see in beans and rice and corn tortillas, or greens and, not the high fat, but tasty meat. I think we get stress release, and in this society there's so much stress out there. And so I had a conversation with a police officer who was down doing a little walkthrough about a community police officer, and he made a comment at the end that he felt more calm after visiting the farm. And I think that's so true. I think nothing like weeding a row of vegetables to get you out of your mind and into what's working, and I think we're so. And of course the exercise, I think the piece for me is building community. There might be someone that at the garden that might come to your apartment and wonder why you didn't make it, right? And also just the connections. I was having a conversation this morning with somebody from our organization who worked for Earth Corps, and they're working in the South End, and they're trying to put community gardens in some of the subsidized housing projects. And his comment was, and it's interesting, this Black Farmers Collective, but his thought was that, and you have a great community here, but imagine if you're a white Vietnam veteran, or just a vet, and you don't have anybody. He said the people that were worse shape in his experience were veterans. And so if we could get veterans out in the garden talking to each other, folks have given a lot for this country, right? How can we give back for them? So I think that building community for me was a big piece. And I think connection to the land. We're natural. We evolved to have actually a physical connection to the land, walking around on the land, and now we're not even touching it most of the time. And so I think that's a big piece of growing your own food, or at least being connected to that. And just even knowing where your food comes from. I think there are the stories that the kids say the food comes from the store, right? I think even if we know that it comes from a farm, how far are we removed from that farm, right? And so just having a piece of that, I think that. And I do want to thank, I thought the food was great this evening, so thank you. So you guys are lucky to have good food to eat here. And then I think for me, feeling part of nature, students especially, but everyone can come out and do a little growing of food, and you are now not separate from the world that we live in, right? You can touch the bugs and be excited about that, but understand that we're all part of the same thing. And I'm wondering if anyone out here has done some growing and feels that there's something I should add to this list. Is there? Yeah, there's a hand, yes.
Once you taste how good whole, fresh food tastes, you won't want to go back to the other crap.
How could I miss the taste thing? Yes, that is so good, the fresh, our tomatoes are grown so they will stay round and red by the time they get to us, right? As opposed to what they actually taste like. And I think that I've been eating a lot of fresh greens. I sometimes don't even add salt, right? You just get to this idea that you're actually tasting what the food is. So that's a great one. I'll go with taste. Any other? I will add that to my list. I don't think I can do it right now, but I'll try that. I wanted to just introduce you to some of the folks that were part of this original group. We were sitting around a table talking about what can we do to improve agriculture, and someone brought this RFP. Seattle Housing said, hey, we have our neighbor. Little did we know that it would take them 3 years to actually get WashDOT to say yes, but we applied. These are the folks that did that. Feed the People, Chef Tark is a local chef, and he was very, very instrumental. Up on the upper right, Tom Willis and his wife, they're farmers, and they have supported actually the growing out of Clean Greens Farm and Market. On the lower left, there's me and Miss Lottie Cross. She passed away a few years ago, but she was really an inspiration to me about how a small organization, Clean Greens, can grow some food at their farm in Duval and bring it into the city and have that. And luckily they still continue. Clean Greens Farm and Market out of New Hope Church, up on New Hope Baptist Church, up on Yesler 22nd. Maybe Reverend Jeffrey still does that. They do a CSA package, so every week people that buy into a box can come and pick it up. And then they also have a free food space there, and this is food that they've grown. So this is in many ways, this is a legacy for Miss Lottie. There's some young folks, the folks on the lower right. Those two guys, they're actually on the board now. They were out volunteering, putting in an orchard, and I asked them if they would support us, and so they're there. And so these are some of the folks that helped get this thing started. On the left is Naima Clark. I think she spoke here. Someone said she spoke from Nurturing Roots. Full circle, she was a ninth grader at Rainier Beach in my science class, and now so. It was Mr. Williams, but now it's Ray. Okay, we're colleagues, and so there's hope, right, in the next generation. That's for sure. And then this is I like to try to have activities for the crew, and so there was a big exhibit at SAM about the connection with water. I don't know if anyone had seen that, and so I asked. I arranged to get some tickets, and we went as a day. And this is some of the crew that you see here. And I thought that we're all in this together with something that was a powerful statement in terms of this. And so you've got folks that are a third my age I'm working with. So one of the things that we try to do is. See, maybe I have a better transition, but one of the things we try to do for young people especially, because a lot of folks say, I don't want to work in the farm, that's slave labor, I don't want that. And then, unfortunately in the United States, most of our food is grown by folks that are really being taken advantage of, right? Farm workers in the United States, really, we have minimum wage, except for farm workers and domestic workers, right? We have just starting to get some farm worker rights, and so I think a lot of folks don't want to get into that. But we like to share that there's a rich history of farming and African American contributions to farming in the United States. Yes, folks were stolen and worked on plantations, and I spent some time in the Northeast, and the folks in the Northeast are starting to acknowledge the fact that it was enslaved labor that built the ships that went on to get the folks, and that people have made a lot of money on that, and it worked all over. Built many of our part of our country. So I start with this idea about black rice, right? That we know about cotton, but folks were stolen from East Africa, West Africa, because they knew how to grow rice. And they brought that knowledge and the rice over to the Carolinas. And so we have Carolina rice. Those huge rice fields that were carved out of the coast of the Carolinas and Georgia, right, were done by hand by enslaved people with the skills in order to do that. So they actually grew the food that made the country work, right? And I think that skill, we always see these folks of just pictures of folks that are just basically manual labor. But really, folks came with skill. Folks came with skill, and I think the rice was the first part, and then of course it went to cotton, which grew the country. You all heard of George Washington Carver, right? Peanuts, right? 200 different products out of peanuts, and I think that's what I learned when I was in school. That this was a food scientist guy, right? That was able to do that. But why is he doing that? Well, he's trying to get a market for peanuts, legumes, because he was a soil scientist, and his mission out of Tuskegee was to try to revitalize the farmland of the South that had really been depleted by the intense cotton and other production. So he's a guy that came up. He didn't invent it, but he certainly pushed crop rotation, right? Different crops at different times. He told folks to go out to the swamps and get that muck and bring it out to their farms, right? To do that. The things we do now, we call that regenerative farming, and it's all fancy, but it really came out of a lot of his work. Cowpeas and peanuts actually fix nitrogen, right? There's a lot of nitrogen in the atmosphere, but plants can't get it. And so if you have a plant that will support the bacteria and nodules in their roots that can take the nitrogen from there and put it into the soil, you're adding green fertilizer. So this was part of that crop rotation that really helped rejuvenate the soil. And then certainly value-added products. I think for farmers today, small farmers today, to be able to be successful, they need to be able to grow food and sell it at a good price, but they also have to have some gig about value-added. So if you could take the cabbage and make sauerkraut, right, then you're ahead of the game. And so I think those are things that he worked on that we're pushing as well. Another guy was at Tuskegee, Dr. Booker T. Watley, was more of the business guy, right? And I think we hear about other folks, but he was really about small farmer operation, and one of his ideas was this clientele membership club where people actually gave money to the farmer up front and in exchange for weekly or bi-weekly deliveries of food, right? Well, we call that a CSA program, community supported agriculture. And so to think that this is one of the things he pushed, and we have that now. So I think that's a testament to the gift that African American farmers' expertise gave us. I think I may have cut a couple more out. I do want to also mention a guy, I'm going to forget his name, but he invented the refrigerated truck. So if there's anything that has kept us getting fresh food, right, is this refrigerated truck. And so he figured out how to do it, actually made a great company and was successful. I need to put his picture back in there. So those are some of the contributions, of folks, and there's many, many more. I would add Fannie Lou Hamer, right, of the Mississippi Democratic Party, right, Freedom Democratic Party. Well, she also was a farmer, and so and she had work. She had a Freedom Farm, and she came up with this interesting idea that she would loan a pair of pigs to people, and then they would have little piglets, and then that was a pig bank, and then they would take that, and farmers could keep the piglets, and then they move this pair around, and to be able to increase this, right? Because there's sort of a huge start of getting something, but if you can get started, that was a big thing. I'm going to have to admit it may come up later in the program, but I thought that was it. And I think I would add too that the civil rights movement was fed by farmers in the South, right? The students from Freedom Summer that came down to support that, they stayed at farms. They were fed by farms, and often at great peril to themselves, right? The folks that lived there, in terms of the backlash from that. So I think we should be proud of our African American farming history, and that's why we try to support it. Yes Farm is your neighbor. How many people have seen it? How many people have driven down Yesler and have no idea that it's right there? Most people, right? It's hidden by trees. It's the freeway right away. Right now, it's a little tricky to get down to, so we're in the process of that. We'll get to that. Actually, trying to build a nice access ramp. So I'll be back for the opening of that show. It's got a great southwest exposure off of the freeway, which is why we sort of took it. We have some water. Seattle Housing Authority promised that they would bring water to the site. Can't really grow food without water. The first year they couldn't do it, so I was hauling water literally in the back of my pickup truck in 55-gallon drums for the small piece that we had. But now we have water coming down, and actually they have the permits to get city water, and so we're going to have, I don't know how many freeway right-of-ways have their own city water, but we're going to get that. So it's a project I think that's really sort of forward-looking, and if we can be successful here, there's lots of opportunities around the country to take some of this land and move it forward. But this is we have this pedestrian access from Yesler Way. We want to have a cooperative farm. It's still in the mix of how it's actually going to do that, but we do grow food for some of the local markets. Our aim would be that we would grow food and sell it to somebody that will give it away. Right? Then you're paying the farmer, but you're helping your community with food, and we would love to be able to do that. We're starting to do some lessons on value-added products, how to take some of the produce and do that. We do education and training, various workshops, and I think one of our successes has been community engagement. We have a site. We have now a lot of folks that'll come down, whether it be a DJ and a chef and someone to do art for the kids, and so we have community days that we have there, and we also have volunteer opportunities on Saturdays from 10 to 3 to come down and sort of help do that, barring access. Here's a picture. This is, I still keep this, I love this. This was drawn by somebody from Seattle Housing before we had it as a conceptual drawing. And so it's from maybe 2016 actually. I forget when he did this. But there's Yesler Way, and that's an urban farm above the freeway. So if you're heading into town on Yesler, right before the freeway, right behind the bus stop, if you look down there, that's where our farm is. It's a long, skinny space. We're actually going to expand the farm. We've got more, I guess we did okay, so now WashDOT's giving us more land, extend to the south. Another project. Yes Farm is there's Hannah Wilson on the right. They're the farm manager there. Hannah was a graduate of the UW in environmental science, did some restoration work, got hired and was doing a lot of restoration work, and what you see now is Hannah standing with, in some of the crops from last summer, right, with the city behind us. It's quite a space. And before, it was actually this before picture, I could have taken one that was, had more, I guess, maybe the color of the space. When we walked through there before, there were lots of folks living there. It was pretty dangerous space. So we've sort of reclaimed that space for the larger community. But on the other hand, we're sort of displacing people, right? If you're living on the land. My rationale is that living in a tent next to the freeway is not the answer, and that we need to provide housing. That's sort of where I'm coming from that. Here's some more photos. I just popped in there. I don't know if you've seen that huge development going in on Yesler. So that's our little greenhouse at the bottom, and it just is going up. And we knew this was coming. We've seen the design. Plenty of people around the world farm up against mountains, right? And so that's what we're doing. I think it's been interesting. One advantage is that contractors took me on a tour, so I was able to look down at the farm. And that right-hand picture, what you're seeing there are some raised beds, and those are our community beds, where we allow folks, we give people from the community space. They can come down and get water. We support them with plants if they can. If they need them, and that's a big piece of the farm is the community beds. And then farther to the south, we have rows of crops. This year, we're putting in a crop rotation system where we have 6 different blocks, and so every year we're going to rotate the crops through there. So when pests lay their eggs on the vegetables here, and the little eggs come out of the ground, next year there'll be a different crop and they'll be confused. And we also interplant with flowers, so the pests don't smell a huge field of one thing and just go there. They're confused, honestly, because we don't want to use pesticides, herbicides. So we're trying to be good. We do some activities. That's me. If you can't recognize that, actually, that was this morning. The University of Washington students came out. They're part of a program. We've been able to give students opportunities to, engage in their studies in relation to something that's actually on the ground. So in this case, these students they're supporting us in reaching out to underserved farmers. They've created a website with some resources. We're going to be using that as part of a program, a federal grant we got to try to connect farmers with resources. There are a lot of small farmers out there, but they need those resources. And then on the right is a picture from a cookout that we had. And so there's folks sitting around waiting in line and eating food and having a good time. We have this great DJ, and every time I go by that little DJ tent, I hear something from my youth. Okay, so I'm happy that we have a little mix the music out there. That's for sure. Future projects for Yes Farm for this site. This is the entrance, and it's a picture going down into the farm, and so access is a little bit tricky. Especially if you'll see in that picture there's a tent. So someone had moved in. We had some discussion with the crew about the best way to get to move people on, and they said that they would take care of this, and it hasn't worked out so well. So I may have to go back to just saying, hey, you gotta go. I was talking to a guy today there. I said, you need, and he said, well, put up a sign with the date that you need people to go. Tell us when you're going to come down here and have us leave. And it makes perfect sense to me, right? That you can't stay there, you're right in the middle of our entrance, but we want to honor you enough not to just roll up in the middle of the night and pack you and your stuff up. So that's something I'm learning, right? How do you deal with a site like that? So we are planning, we're waiting to get some drawings for city permit for actual official ADA access ramp. So we're very excited because, some of our farmers, there's all sorts of ability issues, and it doesn't have to always do with age, right? And so, we know that if we want to be accepting of everybody, we need to be accepted. We need to have a way to get down there. The other picture is the south end. It's a little bit, well, it actually shows it pretty well. There's some rocks and boulders that were thrown down there. You can see I-5 is a traffic jam. I think that's not unheard of, but there's quite a space. It's closer to the freeway. It has a lot more environmental impact. Actually, my dream and the plan right now is to make a circular bed with some sort of symbol in it as a bed, so you can actually see it from above, and that would be very cool on a map. And then eventually to build a greenhouse, but be a geodesic dome greenhouse, starting with the first layer as a fencing and then coming with the greenhouse. It's a crazy, crazy idea, but it's, you know, we've been given an opportunity to try to build some things. And again, that would be temporary, so if we had to move, we could make that. So those are some future projects. You know, there was an encampment down there, so there's some bad vibes out of, there was a lot of drug sales and fencing of materials, and I think a lot of prostitution out of there. There's just a lot of bad vibes, so I'm engaging some folks. That's a traditional Yoruba religion, to go down and see if we can heal the space before we start that process. That's a piece. We'll see. I don't feel it, but some of the crew have gone down there and said, wow, this is just not a good feeling. So we're trying to heal that. We're trying to heal that. The other farm we've got is Small Axe Farm. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bob Marley song, with the Small Axe, but he was their band was the Small Axe, fighting against the Big Tree, which was the big record company. And so one of our board members thought of that, and it sort of stuck. I think it's pretty cool. The farm manager, Masra out there, likes it. And this is 4 acres we're leasing from King County. The experience at Yes Farm gave us the courage, I think, to go out and lease this land. Masra is a young farmer, studied some farming. Actually, you know, was sharing at dinner. As a high school student, he sold food at the university farmers market. And so now that he's growing food, he was so very excited to go back and sell it as a professional. So I thought that's a great story. And we're out there at the University Farmers Market, as well as a small market in Delridge. Delridge is a pretty food desert sort of area, and African community housing supports a farmers market down there. And what's great for us is, and the vendors there, is that you sell to the community, and then the stuff, the produce that you don't sell, they will buy and put into their food program. So it's a great way to get young, starting, inexperienced farmer, you know, some opportunity for economic development. So that's been a great deal. You know, I was able to update this today. We have actually 4 farm interns out there working various times, learning how to be farmers, and then we have 4 farm partners that we're supporting with space on the land to help us grow there, but then they're also growing their own business. Because part of this, I think, is growing more farmers as well as food. There's Masra and our tractor. This was actually one of the first things. We got a small donation. It's huge to me. A small donation 4 years ago that started us off on buying a tractor, and so we're able to do that. And not, you know, I chose this picture because you don't always just do the plowing and the subsoiling and the soil prep, but you load up the pump that King County owns, and you drive it to the Sammamish River, and we set that up. And so King County was able to get water rights to be able to pump some water out of the Sammamish River. This farm space, 16 acres that they had, didn't have water rights for 30 years. And so this is part of what King County does. And so I want to raise up King County and the folks that work in the farm program there for really adding, doing their best to add value to their farm spaces. So yeah, we helped put that pump up, and now we can pump a certain amount of gallons out of the Sammamish River to use as irrigation to grow the crops. An important piece. Yeah, those are the farms. Again, leave some time for questions. So those are the farms, our projects. I would add a project in that we have a federal grant now to try to do outreach to connect small farmers with federal and state and programs. And so we're building that now, and it's forcing us to become more, since it's federal money, we have to keep track of it a little bit better. So I'm engaging someone to do nonprofit bookkeeping. Instead of doing QuickBooks, there's actually sort of a nonprofit system. We have an administrative person that's helping us out part-time. I'm hiring a project manager to run the thing, and so I really feel that we're moving into the big time. And part of it is getting this grant to make that happen. This is the food system diagram. We've got this on the left, which has a lot of pieces, but I like to share this. This is a model that we worked on for preschool, and I want you to think about where you are in this system. So it doesn't matter where you start, but we often like to start with the planting, right? So we plant, and then it grows to harvest. And for young people, I think it's important to know that there's a transportation issue, right? And whether inside that transportation issue, you have some of the food processing, or it's just getting the food to the market, right? And then there's cooking. We do really like to bring it back home for youth, but for anyone. And cooking could be, turning corn into cornflakes, honestly, in terms of that design. And then eating, and a lot of times I think people don't think of the food system and where they fit in it, so we're all eaters at least. And then composting, because we like to try to think of this as a circular thing. I mean, we want to create as much circular economy as we can, and we were having a conversation at the farm yesterday with folks from King County. They're really trying to convince farmers to use Cedar Grove compost that they make out of city industrial, thing, which in one way is good, but there's an issue. I don't know if you've ever got some Cedar Grove compost. A lot of times they have little bits of plastic in it because people will throw their stuff out in a plastic bag, and there's some issues. And so, for us as farmers, actually our farmer doesn't want to use that. And so the county, it's a little bit of a quandary, right? You need to do something with this post-consumer waste, right? You have compost, but do you really want to take the city and the city garbage a little bit and put it in the country? And that's the issue that I think is coming up right now. So if they can clean up their compost, or if we can figure out how to grow a bunch of stuff in the city with that, keeping it there, but it's, you think it's simple, and every time you turn around there's an issue. So I think that's something to sort of think about. The food system. We have a couple, what are we doing? Oh, here we are in the food system. I think I will share a bit about that, just as an educator, right, to speak a bit, in that we compost all the stuff that we have on site, and we're going to use that to expand to the south end. This is really poor soil, compacted clay to begin with. If we can put 6-8 inches of organic material on it and then just start moving it in, we're going to start to build soil with the compost that we have already, the grass and our plants. We plant and harvest out at our incubator farm in Small Axe, and we support planting and harvesting by other farmers. We try to support our incubator farmers by taking some of their food to market. If you've got 4 small farmers and they're each packing up and they're each driving to market, that's 4 times the transportation costs, gasoline needs, and so we're trying to help them with that and support them in that way. We do cooking classes to share cooking methods, sharing cooking methods. Because a lot of times folks will see stuff and they may want to, but they don't know how to cook it, and that becomes a barrier. We have given away some food, and people would come back and say, I couldn't use it. I wasn't taught, or I don't even know what this is, especially. So we try to do that, and we celebrate a lot. And me personally, I've been able to take greens home to Shirley Harper. You remember Shirley Harper from the neighborhood?
Oh, yeah.
So all last summer and fall, I brought greens to Miss Shirley. Just because that's part of this is bringing it back to the neighborhood. And I think if you come and visit, we'd love you to take some produce. That's how we try to push this out. And you all have cooking upstairs too, right? So you could do our own. Maybe we can get some produce for the meals here. I just want to, we're at the questions. I'd like you to think for a minute about what some ways you and your community might contribute to a healthy food system, right? Think about, what you've heard here. Maybe you want to share it, or maybe you also have some other questions that I might be able to answer as we go. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, we have some mic runners.
Oh my goodness.
3 mic runners, so Susan is over there, and Fran is here, and May. So you want to be more in the center after we hear from you, just a minute, and then, well, okay, you can figure it out. But yes, go ahead.
Say when. Okay. Have you considered producing your own cookbook?
Yeah, we haven't. I think we
Well,
there are a
consider
lot.
it.
Thank you. That is interesting though. That there was someone that actually was producing a cookbook that wanted to use some of our recipes, and I think we do have some recipe cards. I think that might be the next step. Thanks for that thing. I mean, sharing, and that could be. We also need fundraising, so that might be a good thing. Yeah.
What's the difference between a collective and a co-op?
Okay. So it's interesting. We came up with that name, Black Farmers Collective. It sort of seems that it would be a lot of farmers. It started out with a small group of people. I think, for us, collective is people that want to support each other like a family. Co-ops have a little bit more, maybe economic structure to them. That is, maybe it's a cooperative farm, and so you put in certain hours of work, and that's kept track of, and then whatever you make, you get that back. That I would say. I think we've also, simple.
Okay.
I have a question right here.
Okay.
Since you're right on the highway, do you ever worry about lead contamination? And I assume you've tested the soil.
Right. The question was about contamination in general. We're lucky that they've gotten rid of leaded gas.
But the soil is still
But the soil. So lots of levels there. One is that the freeway was built in 65, and so there was a few years of leaded soil, but the soil there actually was just fill, and so it wasn't good, but our tests showed that it did not have a lot of pollution in it. I think the pollution is definitely an issue, especially for urban growing, right? We ask people to grow their own food, and then we have them dig up the yard next to the garage that had lead paint dumping on it, right? I think we do a lot of soil testing. We have a partnership with Dr. Melanie Malone at the University of Washington, Bothell. We've done some soil testing. We've even tested the soil and the leaves of the plants. And so even if there's a tiny trace, that has not been picked up. But I think it's a big issue. For me, I say, first of all, wash the vegetables a lot. And I think, honestly, I am more worried about if folks are really spending a lot of time there, how close they are to the freeway, right? And COVID was really bad, but we all know what masks are now. And I think if our farmers wore masks, if they made sure to not take the dirt anybody not take the dirt that from their shoes, into their homes. When they do that, that's how you're going to really reduce the thing. There is a program out to try to test soils. Some of the community gardens, even ones that were legacy home gardens, especially in the central area, we found that there was a high concentration of lead, and so one thing to do is to just basically level it, seal it off, and then add more soil. You have to do that. So I think urban growing does have some issues that you want to really be careful of. Again, washing your vegetables. On the other side, eating more fresh vegetables is really good for you, right? So.
Yeah, sorry, Joan and Nancy.
Couple of questions. I think you started out talking about the collective being kind of unique to this area. And I wondered if you had applied to sell at the Pike Place Market, and also the millions of people that go through there, if you had a brochure, that if you had a table with produce and a brochure, it might be a way to raise money, and second, sell and plant the idea about the collective.
Yeah, thank you. The question about Pike Place Market. We do, one of our cooperative farmers has been selling spices, value-added from peppers down there. The market has reached out a couple of times. It's really a capacity issue in terms of getting down there. And a planning issue. I think it's a great idea to be able to highlight some of that. It was brought up. Actually, the market has a couple of stands that seem to be rotating through with people. But honestly, for us now, it's capacity. To be able to, first of all, grow enough to be there every week, and then second of all, to have somebody down there selling. But I think it's a great idea to sort of push this somehow, right? To get this in front of folks. We don't sell enough vegetables to pay everybody. Obviously we rely on grants and donations to make this operation. I think the idea that we're also trying to grow farmers and grow community is something that people want to support. So great idea. Thank you. Yeah.
Nancy.
Is it on? Is it on? I lived in Georgia for 45 years and worked extensively with the Master Gardener program from the University of Georgia. And that was amazing in terms of putting educational resources into schools. We worked with kids in junior high and gardens and all that kind of stuff. How much do you work with the University of Washington and with Master Gardeners in general?
Right, so Seattle Tilth here in Seattle has a big program with gardeners and gardener education, and they have a master's program. I think we have a few budding environmental education programs. We have a partnership with iUrban that usually does a lot of tech stuff, but they have a farming little component. So we have some folks out for that. We have right now we're offering our farm to folks that work with Yesler Terrace youth in the summer, actually just to come down and use the space for the farming. We try to educate ourselves, but we're not in a position right now, I think, to go out and educate. What we do is offer folks to come and see a vision of what they might be able to do, and then we do have resources to send folks. I think we're learning, but I don't think any of us would call ourselves a master gardener yet. Yeah. Thank you, though. That's a great.
Yes.
This is just so interesting. I'm so thrilled to see this kind of farming in this intensely urban place where we live. We are right in the middle of a very large city. There's not a lot of land, and so the challenge that you guys are undertaking and then doing it with communities that have historically needed some assistance is just thrilling.
I'll say, my son has been the farm manager of a cooperative farm in New England for 30 years. Grew up and went to Garfield High School here. Unfortunately left Seattle and loves New England, but one of the things that you touched on, but that I've noticed from the farm that, the co-op farm that he runs now, is that you said you don't use pesticides, and to the extent, thinking of it from an environmental perspective, not using pesticides, maybe working with university folks to figure out how to be able to grow food without having to use pesticides is a real benefit for the environment, as is buying local food. For us, helping the food system, having local food means that we're not having things come from South America or Mexico or wherever, not buying fruit in the wintertime that comes from New Zealand. That stuff also comes at an environmental cost, and so thinking about buying food that's grown locally with the least amount of transportation costs is something that we can all contribute to as we're thinking about the environment too. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that comment. I think that might be a piece I can add, in that we're also trying to do this climate mitigation by sequestering carbon and reducing our carbon footprint. We're also trying to experiment with growing as the environment changes, so we're adapting to that. And it's tough in the middle of the city, not having a river to pump from. So we'll see how that goes. Next year we're going to start paying for our water, so we're also going to be practicing some water conservation. But thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, here, one more
Couple
question.
questions.
Shall we?
Oh, there's a hand.
First, I wanted to say thank you very much. I had the privilege of starting a small garden at Dearborn Park Elementary in the late 90s. When I retired, I had, starting out on the farm for 13 years, I had to do something farming. And I really respect your building the community, because when I started volunteering at Dearborn Park, it was a drop-off. Push your kids out the door and go.
Yeah.
A lot of single parents, etc. And I was able to get through the seed bank. There were 11 different culture students in that school at that time. And I got seeds from every culture from the seed bank. And the kindergartners got to take the seeds to the city greenhouse and plant them in cups. And then on the hottest day, I swear, in summer, I took every child in that school and they planted a plant. The good news, I don't know if it's still going after the pandemic, but before then, it was still going, and they were having a harvest dinner for the school and the community.
Oh, wow.
But parents were getting involved. They were jumping out of the car saying, oh, I haven't seen a white eggplant since I left the Philippines, or whatever. But you're building this community besides the health of the food. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think that's part of it. I wanted to get to this picture from the joy of working with the soil. These are some youth, not at our garden, but at another space.
We could let you rest now if there aren't any more questions, but everybody wants to say thank you, so.
Yes, we will definitely keep in touch in terms of that. You know, let's talk about setting up as soon as we get some better access, setting up a visit. We'd love to, we're all part of the same community here, right? And so we want you to be able to come down and experience it. If you want to know more, if you have some questions, I put my email. It's interesting, we got this. You have a long name in your email. BFC was taken, so we have blackfarmerscollective.org. And then we also have a website. So if you're interested in just going and checking it out, I try to have the young folks keep the website updated, but they're very much into Instagram, which is I am not so into. So we have Instagram, I believe Facebook as well. So if you want to try to follow us, you know, you know, I guess I can do the ask. If you want to donate, you can go to the website and donate a little money. If you're interested, I can give you our office address. Still is at my house, but soon it will be somewhere. But you know, really appreciate you letting me come out. I really appreciate the great dinner that we had here and the great reception that everyone gave me here. So hope we stay in touch and you feel like you can come and visit. So thanks very much.